Stretch out your hands, stretch it. It's going up from the ground. It's coming up from the boom here. Off. Side by side. When you're a young boy in Melbourne, Australia, and you realize that you love music and you go to the opera and you're seeing theatre and you become obsessed, a lot of time is spent in your bedroom listening to music on the radio, for buying records, people giving you records as recommendations. And so a lot of my childhood, particularly my adolescent years, was spent in my bedroom listening to hundreds and thousands of hours of music. And I came through Debussy through piano. I was learning some very simple Debussy pieces when I was 10 or 11. I liked them, and I liked the sound world. And then when I was a schoolboy, it was when I was 15 or 16, one of the teachers at school said you should listen to Pelléas and Melisande. And I remember liking it, but not quite understanding it. I think at that stage I was much more into Mahler and Wagner, and so I didn't quite get it. So one blind man here on eins, one blind man on zwei, and one blind man on the Trommel. And I never saw it on stage in Australia. I think it was done once or twice, but I never actually saw it. It was only when later when I came to Europe, I actually saw a production. I was sort of disappointed when I saw it on the stage, because I thought when you hear it, it's so extraordinary. And then I realized then that that's very important for a director, is to not to try and illustrate what is happening in that music, because you cannot compete with Debussy's sound world. And secondly, it makes everything weaker if you try and put those metaphors on stage. You have to find other things to do. Sometimes you have to contrast the world on the stage with what's happening in the music, so that there's some sort of contradiction happening there, visually and orally. But it was a piece that it's haunted me. I think that's the word. It's haunted and followed me. I think there are millions of people around the world that are haunted by this opera. That's the word that I would use more than any other word to describe what this opera does. It haunts you. It's the word that best describes my reaction to this piece. It doesn't get out of you. It stays with you. It stays in the shadows. It's like a sort of vapor that moves in and out of your system.
Meine Liebe zu dieser Oper ist jetzt schon etwa 16 Jahre alt. Schon im Studium hatte ich damit Kontakt und bin sehr glücklich drüber und habe schon Ausschnitte draus gesungen in der Hochschule. Und seitdem war das immer ein großer Traum, dass das irgendwann mal auch auf der großen Bühne kommt. Und nun ist es soweit. Aufregend. Also endlich mal die ganze Rolle auch zu singen, natürlich, ist eine Riesenherausforderung. Und in dem Haus hier mit den Leuten, ja, einfach schön.
Play with him, play with him, spiel mit ihm. Sie kommt verführerisch. Yeah, here, I'm not going to give you, and I'm not going to give you, but she gives it to him. But not the hands, yeah? But don't give me ballet. Don't give me that. It's just, take me, touch.
It's one of the greatest operas that it's not an opera at all. It's an anti-opera, in that Debussy took all the conventions of opera, threw them away. No more gone, no more trios, no more taking time to make a quintet where time stops. This is a different type of timelessness. From the beginning of the piece, we have this feeling that we are lost in the forest. The first line of the opera of Golaud, I will never get out of this forest. And that doesn't change from the beginning to the very last note of the opera. And I think Debussy's art is to develop everything completely out of the text. He really took a play that is remarkable in its own right, but maybe not necessarily the greatest play we've ever seen. But for Debussy, the evocative language of Maeterlinck was the exact right impetus for him to find his musical voice as an opera composer. He had made efforts at operas before, but Pelléas and Mélisande really stands by itself as a totally revolutionary opera.
Je partirai demain.
Go. So, play with him. Give me a new favor. She becomes very naughty and sexy, and she goes, hey, you can, yeah? We just, unexpectedly, she's Angst vorher, und dann plötzlich, he said, give me your hand. No, you cannot have my hand. She's Carmen, plötzlich. Yeah, well, I don't know what production of Carmen you've seen, but that's no production of Carmen in this house would have been that. I'm very excited that this season we present our new Kapellmeister to start the season, and at the end of the season we present our new general music director, Ines Rubikus, which is very exciting. So there are two, I think, really very interesting and exciting young conductors working in the house this season as our GMD on my production of The Nose, and beginning the season on my production of Pelléas and Melisande. It's very important that I have a relationship with both of them straight away, which is why they're both doing those pieces this year. And with Jordan, I think it's great because he's been in Europe for a few years. He's a very opinionated, energetic, enthusiastic, interesting young conductor. And I think the thing for me, which is the absolute crucial thing to see in a young conductor in the opera, is how do they work with the singers and how do they work with the text and the vocal line of opera. It's simply not enough to wave your hands in the air and say that things should be louder, softer, faster or slower. It's simply not enough to just work with the orchestra. If you're an opera conductor, your main work for most of the rehearsal period is with the singers. The articulation of the text by the singers, it doesn't matter if it's Debussy or Mozart or Janacek or Zimmermann or Paul Abraham, is the fundamental work for the conductor during the rehearsal process. And we've had wonderful time on playing with the many possibilities in this text, because one of the things that Debussy gives us, and Mantelank gives us from his text, is thousands of possibilities for the articulation of one sentence. So you have to try things out, and that's been a joy.
Famously, he said to the singers on the first day of rehearsal, please forget that you are a singer when you perform this piece. He wanted to find that it's almost spoken all the way through. The intimacy that comes out of there, sometimes a very dangerous intimacy, but it comes so naturally when you feel the singers, the breath that leaves their mouth that comes also out of the pit together, and it's the words that lead all the sound. I think that's an incredible gift of Debussy, and he did it like nobody else before him and nobody else after him.
Was ich so interessant an dieser Rolle finde, ist, dass man ganz andere Farben machen kann. Man kann viel ins Sprechen gehen, man kann viel Piani machen und ja, es ist eine ganz andere Herausforderung, als man das vielleicht sonst hat.
Debussy develops melody in such an unusual and unique way in this piece. Sometimes a melody, the first time you hear it, you don't realize it's a melody. I'll give you an example. The very beginning of the piece is an exceptional example of that. We start, we're completely lost in the forest, but we feel already not only timelessness, but the expanse of this forest, which is really, the forest is maybe a metaphor for the unbewusst, the unconscious. Fate intrudes on the forest. Who could imagine that this is a melody? It's not a melody, it's two notes. And with the harmony, it doesn't move. But it's everything. It's nothing and it's everything at the same time. I think this kind of whole tone world with which Debussy is so well associated. Here he was able to say in these first measures, in a totally modal, normal way we understand, and then all of a sudden, the human element intrudes on this forest. And I think this idea, it's really a psychological, psychoanalytical piece. All the markings of Debussy are dramaturgical, psychological implications. And I think for us, having discovered that early, we were fortunate to be able to try to inform each of these things, because what Debussy has offered us, I think, sometimes to explain an idea limits its potential. And the mysteriousness of this piece comes out from the fact that you can play one phrase and it can be interpreted 12 different ways. And that's an incredible gift that Debussy has given us, that an actor on the stage can do that. But with opera, it's not always possible. The way the composer has set a phrase, it means something. There's rhetoric there. It implies something. With Debussy, you sing it, and 6 different people interpreted it 6 different ways, and I think that's fantastic.
No one sits on the fence with this opera. It's not an opera that you think, oh, it's okay. I went to the opera on Saturday night and I saw Pelléas and Melisande, and it was okay. I tend to hear very black and white opinions. So there are people who adore it, are intoxicated by it, are haunted by it, as I said, and adore it. Musicians, audiences, singers, directors and conductors. And then there are also musicians, singers, conductors, directors and audiences who can't stand. I know a few very intelligent people who are opera people who say to me that for them it is a torture chamber. And I can understand that, because there are a few operas that I feel that way about. I think that it has always had that reaction in people. I think you have to be prepared to let Pelléas and Melisande in. It's not an opera, you have to invite it into you. You can't just sit there passively, it doesn't work. You have to enable what Debussy's music does to invite that into you and your soul and your system. And if you don't want to invite the music in, then the music won't come in. It will always remain outside you.
More the Zusha, from Jonathan, not to the ground. Yeah. That's it, now I can see your face. Jonathan, careful, la vérité. Didn't have, what last time you did it was great. You went, la vérité. And now you went, la vérité. You sang the first one too much. Really? You know, last time was great. You went very impulsive. Yeah. La vérité, the truth. La vérité. Yeah. The truth, and then the truth. Not the truth, the truth. So, sehr, sehr schön.
If you go the direction of the cliches, then you're doomed. If it's just an impressionistic wash of colour and everyone's walking around dreaming and floating and looking incredibly serious and portentous, then of course you're not going to have a good night at the theatre. So we've tried to reject that. I wanted to find a very reduced world, so Klaus Grünberg and I have decided to create a very claustrophobic space where literally the singer's body and voice and light and space are very connected. And there's no props and there's no walls. So the walls, but there's no doors, there's no sort of room architecture. It's a space where these characters have no control of their entrances and exits. It's very interesting that the opera is full, amongst many things, of arrivals and departures. And this act of arrival and departure, which happens right throughout the opera. Melisande arrives in the castle. People are leaving the castle. The ships are coming, the ships are going. Light comes, light goes. Darkness arrives, darkness departs. It's a very, very important theme, and it just needs to find, we found a metaphor that literally people can't arrive and depart in this production themselves. Fate, time, destiny, whatever you want, drives these people forward. They don't even have control of how they're coming on the stage. And through a very simple device that Klaus Grünberg came up with, we managed to sort of convey that metaphor. And on that metaphor, with that metaphor, we combined then this idea of these very lonely individuals, because essentially the piece is a love story, of course it is, between 2 men and 1 woman, 2 half-brothers and 1 woman, but also a piece about loneliness, about people who are trapped, about people who are unsure of where their homeland is. It's about people who are unsure what love is, who are unable to love. And in the end, it's not just a piece about Pelléas and Melisande. It's a piece about Arkel and Geneviève and Golaud and Inold, and these sort of 6 characters that merge in and out of this space for 3 hours. I think he's in really, really große Schmerz. I think he really, really deep wounds here. And you don't have to all the time, but if you're sitting there, he can't sit properly. Weißt du? You know, it's like, and you're being very, I'm a patient, and it's like, it's fine. Oh, yeah, fuck. And then he forgets for a little moment. And it doesn't have to be always this pain. It could be, fuck, my hand hurts. Yeah, but always etwas. Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, sehr, sehr schön. Very good. Okay, we go on tonight. Yeah, 19 Uhr. Well done, guys.
He has such an incredible vision for things, but the particulars he likes to find in the room. And so that meant for us that we really had the chance to create a brand new Pelléas et Mélisande. We all know the challenges of staging such a piece. What are we going to do with the ring in the second act? What happens in the fifth act? And that we were able to really approach each of these challenges fresh. And I hope what we came up with was really a brand new door or window into a piece like Pelléas et Mélisande, which is so often misunderstood. I think it's a big misunderstanding that Pelléas et Mélisande is 3 hours of atmosphere and very quiet and just, it's an art of subtlety, of great nuance, but it's an incredibly human and dramatic piece. And I think we see some of ourselves in each of these characters. And I think what Barrie's done on the stage has really brought that to life in a simple way, without props, without any of the extra artifice. Debussy also said he wanted to strip away his operas from all parasitic elements.
One of the joys about being intendant and chef de regisseur of an ensemble house, particularly with the quality of the Komische Oper, is that you've got great people to work with. So you have a shorthand. So all the people that are in this production I've worked with before. Some of them I've actually worked with over 10 years. So people know sort of what you mean, and I know what language to use when I'm talking to the performers when we're rehearsing. But secondly, and most importantly, you can trust each other. Because trust is something very, very important, I think, in the process of creating any theatre. That there's an unspoken trust that the performers can make mistakes and explore, and I can make mistakes and explore, and you can really go deep within the material in the rehearsal period with the sense that you can make mistakes and go down a wrong direction and try things again, as well as knowing that you can trust the people that ultimately they will deliver. When you work with new people, sometimes it's fantastic because you're excited, and sometimes it can be a disaster. And in this particular instance, there's none of that because we all know each other. That's not to say it's a love fest. We don't all sit around going, you're fabulous, we love each other. It's not that at all. It's just that it's a classic example of how special the ensemble repertoire system is, because you have people who are in lots of other shows, who have been with the company for years, they all know each other, and it creates a very different atmosphere on the stage.
Natürlich weiß man, wer man ist, aber dass wir beide zum Beispiel jetzt so eng zusammenarbeiten, ist auch das erste Mal. Also, ja. Aber es hilft natürlich, dass wir ein Ensemble sind, klar, weil man sich vielleicht...
Man kennt sich ja schon.
Man kennt sich schon ein bisschen, ja.
Und die anderen kennen wir auch.
Oh, hätte ich dich vorher gekannt.
For me, it's been a real pleasure to go through this piece with the orchestra, because it's a gift really to orchestras. We get so caught up in the idea, 85% of it is pianissimo, più pianissimo, always less. But for them, it's such a discovery because it requires a different type of virtuosity. It's a kind of piece that on the first day of playing, you can already walk straight into it. It's not Richard Strauss thinking, oh God, when I can play those notes, finally I'll understand. It's really the type of piece where on the first day we play together, we already have ensemble and we hear sounds we never thought were possible. So I think this is the type of piece in which you see the development of an orchestra, the characteristics of an orchestra develop. Debussy said that he accused Richard Strauss, funnily enough, he said in his orchestration it was like an American drink, American cocktail, 18 ingredients and you can't tell what any of them are. And he wanted in his orchestra sound that when it's an oboe playing, when it's a bassoon playing, that the singular characteristic of these elements come through. And so I think this is what we've been trying to encourage with the orchestra, and they've had such a pleasure discovering the fact that, you know what, French music played by a German orchestra, but their personality coming through in each of these lines is fundamental to us being able to create Pelléas et Mélisande on the stage.
We want to take people on an emotional journey, a wonderful, strange, emotional journey. If you like Edgar Allan Poe, and if you understand Edgar Allan Poe and understand this claustrophobic mixture of erotic and horror, you, I think, will like Pelléas and Melisande. This combination of horror and erotic, of course, goes through many artists, and many artists that have been quite influential in the production and my work, whether it's Edgar Allan Poe, the paintings of Francis Bacon, both have this combination of erotic and horror. And I think Claude Debussy has this combination of erotic and horror, where these two elements, which normally are separated, you know, are combined. So what is beautiful one moment and sensual one moment can become terrifying the next, and you don't quite know why it's terrifying, and you don't quite know why it's beautiful. And the great thing about Pelléas and Melisande is it actually does not answer any questions. It poses lots of questions, but doesn't answer many of them. And I think that is one of the great glories of the piece. So as a contrast to what we're doing next, which is Fiddler on the Roof, you couldn't get more of a difference. But it's also fantastic that once again at the Komische Oper we try and give our audiences and our artists this incredible spectrum of the possibilities of music theatre. And so the day after Pelléas and Melisande opens, I close that Debussy world and I go into the world of the Russian shtetl for Fiddler on the Roof. But that's another story.